The snow was already falling when Jenna crossed the Peace Arch border into British Columbia. She sat in the passenger seat of the rental SUV, watching flakes drift in slow spirals against a dull grey sky. Seattle had been rainy that morning, but this was something else. The road signs switched from miles to kilometers. The gas stations started advertising prices per litre. It should have felt like a short drive north. Instead, it felt like she'd slipped into an alternate version of the Pacific Northwest. They pulled off the highway into a quiet suburban neighborhood in North Vancouver, where her partner Luke had grown up. He was Canadian-born, but they'd met at a university in Oregon. Now, after 5 years in Portland and a lot of conversations over late-night tea, they were trying life in his hometown. Jenna had agreed to a trial year. She had remote work, no kids yet, and a deep curiosity about what Canadian life might actually feel like. That first hour in the neighborhood gave her plenty to chew on. The houses were modest, no massive SUVs in the driveways. Instead, she saw compact hybrids, snow-covered bikes locked to porches, and signs on fences that read things like "Slow down," "Kids playing," and "Neighborhood watch." News Valence. The extra U in neighborhood threw her off for a second. French and English, side by side. She hadn't realized how constant that would be inside Luke's parents' house. Everything smelled like cedar and spiced tea. His mom greeted her with a long hug and a "welcome home, dear," then handed her a pair of thick slippers. "No shoes indoors," she said gently. Jenna kicked off her boots and followed them into a living room that was cozy in a very un-American way. Not minimalist, not oversized, just lived in. Books about Canadian history, a quilt on the couch, maple leaf pins in a dish by the door. That night, they went grocery shopping. And that's where Jenna's first real jolt of culture shock hit. The milk was sold in bags, actual plastic bags, sitting in a stiff pitcher. She stared at them in disbelief. "What do I do with this?" she asked, holding one up. Luke laughed and gave her a quick demo, snipping a corner and sliding it into the jug. The cashier asked how her day was going. Not in a robotic way, but with actual eye contact. People in line didn't sigh or check their phones. No one looked irritated when the person ahead fumbled with coins. And those coin sloonies and tunias clinked in Jenna's hand like tokens from a foreign board game. Later that week, she wandered into a Tim Hortons to grab coffee while Luke ran errands. The place was buzzing quietly, construction workers laughing over breakfast wraps, an elderly couple sharing a newspaper, a teenage girl helping her brother with homework. It didn't feel like a coffee shop. It felt like a living room everyone had agreed to share. She ordered a double-double because she'd heard someone else say it. And when the cashier smiled, Jenna smiled back, even though she had no idea what she'd just asked for. And as she stepped out into the soft falling snow, clutching a too-sweet coffee, something in her chest fluttered. Not joy exactly, not fear either. Just the first tender bloom of knowing this wasn't home, not yet. But it wasn't not home either. Something quiet and unfamiliar was beginning to take root. The routines crept in slowly, like frost gathering on a window overnight. By the second month, Jenna was navigating life in Canada with a blend of curiosity and constant second-guessing. Her mornings began with the soft ping of Slack messages from her US clients, time-stamped hours behind her. While the Pacific Northwest time zone hadn't changed, everything else had. The pace, the tone, the invisible expectations. Each weekday, she worked from the second-floor bedroom of Luke's childhood home, where the desk overlooked snow-capped roofs and tidy sidewalks. On breaks, she'd wander into the kitchen for tea, not coffee. Oddly enough, Tim Hortons had made her sweet on steeped tea, something she never drank back in Oregon. She found herself saying sorry when squeezing past Luke's mom in the hallway, even when it was clearly not her fault. The word was starting to feel natural. Still, friction surfaced in the quietest corners of daily life. Jenna couldn't quite figure out the post office. She once arrived 2 minutes after closing and was met with a firm but gentle shake of the head. No pleading, no just one quick thing. The rules were the rules. Another time, she tried to make small talk with the bus driver like she might back in Portland. He smiled but didn't chat, just nodded and drove off with a calm efficiency. Even grocery shopping came with its hidden codes. She reached for a plastic bag at checkout one afternoon and caught the raised eyebrow of the cashier. "Would you like to purchase a bag?" he asked, a polite but unmistakable cue. Right, she was supposed to bring her own, again. But the biggest surprise came during her first visit to the doctor's office. Luke had helped her register for the provincial health plan, and though she still didn't fully understand how it all worked, she was floored by what happened. No insurance card, no copay, no long wait in a plastic chair surrounded by pharmaceutical posters. Just a soft-spoken nurse, a calm physician, and a sense of being treated like a human rather than a policyholder. "It's covered," the receptionist said with a shrug when Jenna asked about payment. "All of it?" she asked, blinking. Double quotes. "Well, it's public health care," the woman replied, smiling kindly, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. The culture shock wasn't loud. It didn't come in the form of a big, embarrassing misunderstanding or a dramatic confrontation. It came in the slow erosion of Jenna's reflexes, the way she used to hustle across crosswalks, always in a rush, even when no cars were coming, the way she used to feel the need to prove herself in every meeting, to lead with her resume. Here, she was starting to notice that conversations didn't always orbit around ambition. One Saturday, Luke invited her to a dinner party hosted by one of his old high school friends. Jenna showed up nervously overdressed, expecting wine pairings and sparkling banter. Instead, she found herself sitting at a kitchen table covered in mismatched bowls of chili and loaves of homemade bread. Everyone had brought something. No one mentioned job titles. They talked about hiking trails, the Canucks' losing streak, a local artist who painted murals downtown. At one point, someone asked Jenna about life in the States. She gave a thoughtful answer, something about the speed, the scale, the constant self-marketing. A woman across the table nodded and said, "It must be a lot, always having to shine so bright." It wasn't judgmental, just an observation. But it stayed with her. Later that night, as they walked home under the halo of streetlights, Jenna found herself asking Luke, "Do people here ever feel behind?" "Behind what?" he asked. And she didn't have an answer. Spring came slowly, like a whisper in the branches. The snow melted into slush, the air softened, and tiny yellow crocuses began appearing in the grass by the sidewalk. Jenna had been in Canada for nearly 6 months, but it felt both longer and shorter than that. She walked differently now, less like she was late for something and more like she was arriving. There was no single moment when she decided she belonged. It wasn't the healthcare, or the bagged milk, or the quiet public transit rides. It was something else, an internal shift, a loosening, a softening. She realized it one afternoon while sitting on a park bench, watching an older man feed birds from a Tupperware container. No phone, no rush, just him, and the birds, and the stillness. Jenna sat beside him and didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence wasn't awkward. It was respected. That was the word she kept coming back to, respect. Not just for people, but for time, for boundaries, for space. She hadn't known how exhausted she was from performing all the time back home, smiling hard, selling herself, rushing to stay relevant. In Canada, she'd slowly let that go. Her job still mattered, but she didn't lead with it in conversations anymore. She found value in different things: long walks after dinner, learning her neighbors' names, cooking slowly with Luke on Sundays. Still, she missed things. The boldness of American conversations, the convenience of 24/7 stores, the way strangers would strike up random chats in line without hesitation. Canada's restraint sometimes felt like a quiet wall. It could be lonely, but it was a kind of lonely one that gave her room to breathe, to become. Her biggest realization came one evening in early May. She and Luke were at a small lakeside cabin, sipping cider by a fire. She looked out over the water, at the trees still bare from winter, and said softly, "I used to think slowing down meant falling behind." Luke glanced over. "And now?" She thought for a long moment. "Now I think maybe I was running in the wrong direction." That night, wrapped in a thick quilt, she didn't dream of Portland or deadlines or 5-year plans. She dreamt of pine trees and loons calling across the lake, and a version of herself she hadn't met until now. If you've ever crossed a border, not just in geography, but in values, you know the feeling. Life still looks familiar, but it lives differently. And if you stay long enough, you start to live differently too.